He hadn't been seen out and about for months, but now the Iraqi Shiite leader Muqtada al-Sadr has made a dramatic return to frontline politics. The head of one of Iraq's most powerful armed movements, the Mahdi army, arrived at his mosque in the central town of Kufa to the cheers of more than 1,000 supporters. Since al-Sadr made his appearance, Iraqi police say a Mahdi army leader in the southern town of Basra has been killed. John Cookson reports.
After a 4-month absence, Muqtada al-Sadr has appeared again, this time at Friday prayers at the South Iraq city of Kufa. He delivered a blistering broadside at Israel, Britain and the United States, calling them the evil trio, and he called for a withdrawal of occupying forces.
I renew my demand to the Iraqi government to ask the occupiers to leave Iraq or to put a timeline for their withdrawal. I ask the Iraqi government not to let the occupiers extend their time in Iraq. Even for one day, the government doesn't have the authority to do that.
His sudden reappearance comes at a critical time for Iraq. The Maliki government is weak and divided, and al-Sadr is trying to broaden his power base. Meanwhile, in Washington, a deal ended months of wrangling over Iraq funding between a Republican president and the Democrats who control Congress. The Democrats saying the days of blank checks were over. Capitulation may be, but the Democrats have reasserted congressional control over a war that was unthinkable a few months ago.
Engaging in combat in the civil war in Iraq, as the President has us doing there, we have lost thousands of Americans. The number is hard to measure, but everyone agrees easily over 100,000 Iraqis. The cost to our reputation and our military readiness is incalculable, but it is huge.
The next critical time will be in September when the funding runs out, but the Democrats even then won't want to be accused of depriving the US military of backing in a war in which thousands of American soldiers have died.
We cannot and will not abandon the Iraqis to be butchered by these terrorists in their midst. And we cannot and will not abandon our mission.
The focus now shifts to the Maliki government in Baghdad. The new deal on funding sets benchmarks the Iraqi government must meet. But Baghdad's record for meeting deadlines like constitutional change is poor and is testing American patience. John Cookson, Al Jazeera.
The United States has stepped into the standoff in Lebanon between the army there and gunmen from the Fatah al-Islam group. US military planes have been landing in the capital Beirut, bringing in military supplies. America says it agreed to rush them in after a request from the Lebanese government, whose troops are still out in force around the Nahar al-Barad refugee camp. Here's John Terrett.
The US Air Force on Lebanese soil. This giant of the skies touched down at Beirut airport, packed with equipment for the Lebanese army.
The same shipment have been approved 3 months earlier when the defense minister of Lebanon was in the United States. However, there is a high level of secrecy concerning the content, but as far as we know, there is a bulletproof vest, there is the helmet, there is some spare parts of the helicopter that have been delivered like 1 year ago. Moreover, there is some ammunition concerning for tanks as well as for artillery.
The speedy visit to Lebanon's main airport is the first tangible sign of US backing for the Lebanese authorities in their battle with Fatah al-Islam. In Tripoli itself, scene of this week's battle between Lebanese soldiers and the group holed up in the Nahar al-Barad Palestinian refugee camp, an uneasy calm. Sporadic gunfire punctures the lull as the Lebanese army prepares either for a siege or to storm the camp. Thousands of people who once lived in the now destroyed, tightly packed area have fled. Many wound up here at Badawi camp.
We don't even have pillows and blankets. What can I say? Life is hard for us.
Friday prayers never more poignant for them. Meanwhile, the search for a diplomatic solution continues. Lebanese Prime Minister Fawad Sannura met the PLO's man in Lebanon, Abbas Zaki. Palestinian factions in Lebanon also met on Friday, and the French foreign minister also weighed in. In another development on Friday, from the north, Red Cross vehicles have been entering Lebanon from Syria, carrying aid for thousands of refugees. Meanwhile, analysts say the Lebanese government may pay a price for having that giant US warbird on its soil, reinforcing the image among some in Lebanon that the government is a puppet of Washington. John Terrett, Al Jazeera.
4 people, including a baby, are reported to have been injured in the latest Israeli airstrikes on Gaza. The buildings used by the Hamas's executive force have been targeted, and 2 of the strikes were 15 minutes apart. It's believed a total of 6 missiles have hit the area so far. This as Hamas supporters took to the streets in their thousands, as Shireen Tadros reports.
These exclusive pictures show the very moment an Israeli missile hit a building just south of Gaza City. Residents scrambled to carry the injured to safety. Some of those hurt were children. According to Palestinian officials, 3 missiles struck an executive force base. Moments later, another missile slammed into a building nearby. And as news of another Israeli airstrike filtered in, a sea of green covered the Jabalia camp in northern Gaza. Hundreds of people holding Hamas flags turned up to rally against the Israeli attacks that continue to pound their city. In the last 24 hours alone, there have been 10 airstrikes. One of the missiles on Thursday hit just meters away from the home of Prime Minister Ismail Haniyeh. The small post was used by security forces to guard the perimeter surrounding Haniyeh's residence. Israel claims they weren't trying to assassinate the Prime Minister. In Rafah, Palestinian security men surveyed the site where another airstrike destroyed a metal workshop Israel described as a weapons factory. And in the southern town of Khan Yunis, the executive force of the Interior Ministry was hit. The post had long been vacated, but the strike was yet another warning by Israel that it will hit at the very heart of the Palestinian government. Israel says it's targeting members of Hamas who are firing Qassam rockets at them. But civilians form the bulk of casualties here. Dozens of Hamas government officials, including a cabinet member, were arrested by Israeli forces in raids across the West Bank early on Thursday. Israel says the arrests are in connection to the continuing firing of rockets. They say targeting Hamas's politicians sends a message to the armed fighters. But for Palestinians, the arrests of their elected officials is an attack on Palestinian democracy. A meeting is now scheduled to take place in Egypt between the different Palestinian factions to try and find a united way out of this latest crisis. Shireen Tadros, Al Jazeera.
Ukraine's president has ordered that he should have control of the police force, taking power away from the country's interior ministry. President Viktor Yushchenko had sacked the country's prosecutor general, but the interior minister refused to carry out that order. Fights then broke out between rival security forces. Tim Friend has the story.
Ukraine is teetering on the edge of serious and widespread confrontation. This dispute now goes to the heart of government. The latest twist sparked when President Yushchenko fired the prosecutor general. Rival factions clashed outside the office of the prosecutor, who refused to leave. He told a press conference, "It's possible that I am going to fulfill the decrees of the president, but what if something is written in the decree that contradicts the interests of the country? I will not fulfill the criminal decrees." The prosecutor is an ally of the pro-Russian Prime Minister Viktor Yanukovych. He's been locked in a bitter power struggle with the president ever since he successfully overturned a disputed election result in 2004. Rival supporters were out on the streets again as President Yushchenko suddenly announced that he was taking control of Interior Ministry troops, a direct challenge to the Prime Minister. He rejected the order, escalating the political crisis. President Yushchenko accused the riot police of breaking the law.
What the Interior Minister has done is a crime. I'm saying this plainly. It is the use of force to solve a political conflict.